Australia just quietly became the world's biggest lithium supplier. But that's not even the industry they're dominating that'll shock you. 7 sectors. 0 mainstream coverage. Until now. You've heard about Australia's coal. You've heard about their iron ore. You probably even know they ship a ton of wine and beef. But what you don't know is that while the world obsessed over China, Russia, and the US, Australia slipped into the shadows and seized control of industries so critical, so powerful, that entire nations now depend on them to function. And here's the kicker. You've probably benefited from at least 3 of these industries in the past month without knowing Australia had anything to do with it. But wait. Before we begin, please subscribe to ensure that you never miss out on any of my essential stuff. Comment "I subscribe" below, and I will personally welcome you to our community. With that said, let's get started. I'm ranking these from quietly impressive to wait, what the hell? And trust me, by number 1, you're going to see Australia in a completely different light. Let's start with number 7. While everyone freaked out about China and Russia, Australia made a move that could reshape global energy forever. Meet Marcus Chen, energy analyst from Singapore. He spent 6 months tracking uranium supply chains for his firm. Not the sexiest job, but someone's got to do it. When he finally mapped the data, he found something that made him call an emergency meeting with his team. Australia now controls processing for 48% of the world's reactor-grade uranium, more than any other nation. I kept rechecking the numbers, Marcus told me. Nobody's talking about this. Not the news. Not the analysts. Nobody. Here's what's happening. Australia has massive uranium deposits. Everyone knows that. But they've also quietly built up enrichment and conversion capacity that's turned them into the middleman for global nuclear energy. The Honeymoon and 4 Mile facilities in South Australia process yellowcake uranium for 23 countries, including nations that publicly clash with Australia politically. According to the World Nuclear Association's 2024 Global Supply Report, Australia's uranium enrichment capacity jumped 340% since 2019. Let that sink in. Not 34%. 340%. Why does this matter to you? Because as Europe scrambles to ditch Russian energy and Asia builds nuclear plants at record speed, Australia is the gatekeeper. They decide who gets fuel and who doesn't. But here's the flip side. Local Aboriginal groups near the Olympic Dam mine report a 67% increase in health concerns since the expansion, according to a South Australian Health Department study from 2024. Environmental groups are screaming. Local communities are suffering. But the uranium keeps flowing because, well, the world needs power. That's when things took a darker turn. China mines rare earths. But guess who actually refines them into usable materials? The answer will surprise you. Jennifer Park is a tech supply chain consultant from Seoul. During the 2023 chip shortage, you remember, when you couldn't buy a PlayStation or car, Jennifer was hired to trace where the bottlenecks were. She followed the supply chain for neodymium magnets, the tiny but critical components in EV motors, wind turbines, and smartphones. And she kept hitting the same name, Lynas Corporation. Western Australia. Every Tesla, every iPhone, every wind turbine. The supply chain runs through Kalgoorlie, Jennifer said. One Australian facility has more geopolitical power than entire nations. Here's the insane part. Australia processes 31% of the world's refined rare earths despite mining only 4%. According to the Australian Strategic Materials Report from March 2024, the Lynas facility in Kalgoorlie produces 12,000 tons of refined neodymium annually. That's enough for 25 million electric vehicles. And it's not just tech companies knocking on their door. The Pentagon now contracts directly with Australian refineries, completely bypassing Chinese intermediaries. Think about that. The US military depends on an Australian desert town for the materials that power missile guidance systems. But locals aren't celebrating. Traditional owners of Weld Range filed 14 legal challenges in 2024 over environmental damage and lack of consultation, according to ABC News Australia. The refining process creates radioactive waste, and nobody knows where to put it long-term. Progress or poison? Depends who you ask. Now, here's where it gets personal. If you've ever had a cancer scan, a heart stress test, or a thyroid treatment, There's a 1 in 3 chance Australia saved your life without you knowing. Dr. Amira Hassan is an oncologist in Cairo. In 2023, she started noticing something weird. Every shipment of medical isotopes, those radioactive traces used in PET scans and cancer treatments, came from the same place, the Australian Nuclear Science and Technology Organisation, ANSTO, in Sydney. She didn't think much of it until October 2024, when Canada's Chalk River reactor shut down unexpectedly. Suddenly, ANSTO became the emergency backup for 40 countries. We were 72 hours from cancelling hundreds of cancer diagnoses, Dr. Hassan said, her voice shaking. Australia literally kept our oncology department running. Here's the reality. ANSTO's 2024 production report shows Australia now supplies 35% of the world's molybdenum-99, which decays into technetium-99m, the isotope used in 40 million medical procedures every year. That's 40 million people who need this to detect cancer, diagnose heart disease, and monitor organ function. And here's the terrifying part. Medical isotopes have a half-life of 66 hours. That means you can't stockpile them. There's no backup plan. If Australia stops production, patients worldwide lose access to life-saving diagnostics within 3 days. Only 6 facilities globally can produce this. 6. And Australia runs one of the most reliable. But the human cost is brutal. ANSTO workers report 89% burnout rates due to 24/7 production demands, according to an Australian Medical Association workplace study from 2024. These people are keeping the world's hospitals running, and they're collapsing under the pressure. You won't believe what happened next. Australia ships 2 million live animals overseas every year. But it's not what you think, and the ethics are complicated. Tom Bradshaw is a cattle rancher from Montana. In 2023, he flew to Australia to buy breeding cattle. He'd heard Australian livestock genetics, specifically Droughtmaster and Brahman cattle breeds, had become the global gold standard for heat-resistant, disease-resistant stock. Middle Eastern countries, North Africa, Southeast Asia, they are all buying Australian genetics, Tom told me. These aren't animals for slaughter. They are breeding the next generation of food security. Sounds noble, right? Australia helping developing nations build resilient agriculture in the face of climate change. But when Tom visited the Port of Fremantle export facility, everything changed. He witnessed 41-degree heat, cramped conditions, distressed animals awaiting shipment to Qatar, packed so tightly they could barely move. I support the genetic science, Tom admitted, his voice heavy. But the live transport, that made me sick. Here's the data. Australia exported 1.87 million live animals in 2024, cattle, sheep, goats, worth $1.2 billion. With 73% going to Indonesia, Vietnam, and Kuwait for breeding programs, according to the Australian Department of Agriculture. Australian Livestock Genetics Cooperative Research shows crossbred Australian cattle produce 34% more milk in extreme heat compared to European breeds, critical for food security in warming climates. But the AUSPCA Australia documented 2,847 animal welfare violations in live export in 2024 alone. Thousands of animals dying in transit. Heat stress, injuries, suffering. Farmers argue this builds agricultural resilience in developing nations. Animal welfare groups call it profit over suffering. Export bans were proposed in 2024. They failed in Parliament by just 12 votes. So where do you stand? Is this necessary innovation or inexcusable cruelty? Wait, it gets worse. Australia controls access to the world's largest untapped protein source, and the supplement industry is about to explode. Dr. Sofia Ramirez is a marine biologist from Chile. In 2024, she joined a Southern Ocean research expedition. What she discovered made her question everything she thought she knew about sustainable fishing. Australian licensed vessels harvest 70% of the world's Antarctic krill, those tiny shrimp-like crustaceans that produce the purest omega-3 oils on Earth. You've seen the supplements. You've probably taken them. $45 per bottle at the pharmacy. But here's the thing, Sophia said, staring out at the icy water. Krill are the base of the entire Antarctic food chain. Penguins, whales, seals, they all depend on krill. When she reviewed the catch data, she found that Australian companies had increased quotas by 89% since 2020. They are operating in waters managed by the Commission for the Conservation of Antarctic Marine Living Resources, CCMLR, where Australia holds disproportionate voting power. One nation essentially regulating its own industry, Sophia said quietly. That's a conflict of interest. The numbers are staggering. Australian Antarctic Division's 2024 report shows Australian flagged or Australian licensed vessels caught 312,000 tons of krill in the 2023-24 season, 68% of the total CCMLR catch. The global omega-3 supplement market hit $4.7 billion in 2024, with krill oil capturing 31% market share, according to the Nutrition Business Journal. But here's what the industry won't tell you. WWF's Southern Ocean report for November 2024 warns that krill populations dropped 18% near key penguin breeding colonies, potentially linked to commercial harvesting. The industry claims harvest rates are sustainable at 1% of total krill biomass. Conservationists argue we don't understand Antarctic ecosystems well enough to risk it. Greenpeace launched a 2024 campaign with a gut punch slogan, "Your fish oil, their starvation." Are you taking omega-3s right now? Check the label. There's a good chance it says Antarctic krill oil. And there's an even better chance Australia profited from it while penguins went hungry. This is the part that shocked me most. Australia pioneered a prison model so efficient and so controversial that 14 countries now pay Australian companies to run their jails. Jamal Thompson is a criminal justice reform advocate from Louisiana. In 2024, he investigated private prisons in his state, trying to figure out why conditions were so brutal yet profits were so high. And he found something that made his blood run cold. The management software, the training protocols, even the facility designs. All of it came from Australian companies, specifically Serco and G4S, which operate 40% of Australia's detention centers. I found the same electronic monitoring ankle bracelets in New Orleans that Australia uses on asylum seekers, Jamal said, his voice tight. Same vendor, same contract language, same criticized conditions. When he dug deeper, he learned Australian private prison companies generated $2.9 billion in international revenue in 2023, managing facilities in the UK, New Zealand, United States, and UAE. They've created an industrial model for incarceration, and they're selling it worldwide. Here's the dark truth. The Australian Human Rights Commission's 2024 audit reveals that privately managed detention centers have 53% higher rates of self-harm incidents compared to government-run facilities. 53%. Yet the Australian-designed risk assessment matrix and dynamic security model are now used in 187 prisons across 14 countries. According to the International Corrections and Prisons Association 2024 data. The business model is simple. Australia charges consulting fees, provides management staff, and takes 12 to 18% of operational budgets as profit. It reduces costs by 31%, according to the Productivity Commission report from 2024. But at what human cost? A UK parliamentary inquiry in 2024 called conditions in Australian-managed facilities systematically degrading. Inmates reported abuse. Staff reported being pressured to cut corners. Families reported being unable to visit their loved ones due to arbitrary restrictions. Efficiency versus ethics. Australia chose efficiency, and now they're exporting that choice to your country. If that made you uncomfortable, buckle up. Because this final industry is the one Australia desperately wants to keep quiet. As the planet burns, Australia became the world's leading exporter of fire. Or rather, how to fight it. Captain Maria Gonzalez is a fire chief from California. In 2024, she attended a training program in Victoria, Australia, that fundamentally changed her entire approach to wildfires. Australians have been battling extreme bushfires for decades, Maria said. They've turned tragedy into expertise. She learned tactics like backburning, intentionally lighting fires to remove fuel before a wildfire arrives. Controlled pre-season burns to reduce undergrowth. Ember attack defense, sealing homes against the real killer in wildfires, Not flames, but wind-carried embers that ignite structures from the inside. California never taught her any of this. When she returned home and implemented Australian protocols during the 2024 wildfire season, her district reduced structure losses by 61%. 61%. That's hundreds of homes saved. Families who didn't lose everything. So what's the problem? Here's the dark side. Australian companies now charge $50,000 per firefighter for these training courses. Aircraft leasing companies in New South Wales rent waterbombing planes to Canada, Greece, and the US for $85,000 per day. We are in a climate emergency, Maria said, her frustration spilling over. And Australia is profiting from our disasters. The numbers are stunning. The Australian Bushfire Resilience Export Industry Report from 2024 shows Australia earned $870 million from wildfire-related exports, $340 million from firefighting aircraft leases, $215 million from training programs, $180 million from fire-retardant chemicals, and $135 million from consulting services. The Victorian Country Fire Authority has trained 12,400 international firefighters since 2020. Australian-made Firefox waterbombing drones are now deployed in 9 countries. The Climate Council of Australia released a report in October 2024 with a chilling conclusion. As climate change intensifies, Australia is uniquely positioned to modernize fire disaster response. But here's the part that'll make you sick. While Australia sells firefighting expertise to the world, they remain one of the planet's largest coal exporters, 390 million tons in 2024 alone, according to the Australian Bureau of Statistics. They are literally fueling the climate crisis that creates the wildfires they profit from fighting. They're selling the cure while fueling the disease. Should life-saving knowledge be commodified? Australian fire experts argue they're sharing critical skills that save lives. Critics call it disaster capitalism, profiting from climate catastrophe while refusing to address the root cause. Maria put it best, "I'm grateful for what I learned. I am. But I can't shake the feeling that we are paying Australia to clean up a mess they helped create." So here's my question for you. Is Australia a quiet superpower solving global problems, or an opportunistic player profiting from the world's crises? Medical isotopes that save cancer patients. Incredible. Uranium enrichment that powers nations. Necessary. Firefighting tech that protects homes. Life-saving. But prison systems that increase self-harm. Krill harvesting that starves penguins. Climate disaster capitalism. Live animal export suffering. It's not black and white. It never is. And here's the real question. Did you know about ANY of these 7 industries before this video? Drop a number 1 to 7 in the comments for which one shocked you most. I'm reading every single one. And if you've worked in any of these industries, or if you're from Australia and want to defend or challenge what I've said, I need to hear from you. Because this story, it's just getting started.